There's second in from the left. There's my son, Sergeant Johnson, right there on the screen. How amazing is that on our 250th birthday? Sitting here looking at the screen and seeing your son walk in front of the President of the United States on our nation's birthday. It's absolutely unbelievable.
You know things are bad when John Fetterman, a two-time stroke survivor with literal brain damage, is out here making more sense than the entire Democratic Party. John Fetterman, hoodie, gym shorts, often looks like he just wandered out of a Home Depot. That guy. Yet, he's the first Democrat in Congress to actually condemn the riots in LA. Think about that. Not Schumer, not AOC, obviously. She's probably at the riots handing out granola bars or something. Fetterman, the guy the media told us wasn't all there, turns out he's the only one left with anything there.
Okay, guys, so in our last video, we covered the absolute humiliating failure that the so-called No King's Day protests were, as we all expected they were going to be. Democrats, as usual, think that by sending out a bunch of geriatrics to hold some signs, they're really proving a point. They're totally not owning themselves in the process. But nonetheless, in this video, I also want to cover and give you some of the rundown of the actual event they were allegedly protesting against, which is the so-called military parade that they were massively comparing to authoritarian countries. They said by Donald Trump celebrating the military on their 250th birthday, which seems to me a pretty normal thing to do. Like, this would not be the first time that a parade has happened in DC, including a U.S. military parade. Nonetheless, you saw the massive comparisons of this to North Korea. They were saying he's an authoritarian dictator because he's celebrating the veterans and celebrating our military. It's just utterly ridiculous. And apparently, the hysteria got so out of control, as we'll show you in this video, that even Democrat Senator John Fetterman, who deserves credit as being the sometimes guy who occasionally actually has a brain in that party, actually had to step in. He had to interfere and basically say, wait a minute, Democrats, you ought to calm down a little bit. What is going on here? Again, celebrating our army. This is not a person, it's a coincidence that it falls on Donald Trump's birthday, but it's not because of Donald Trump's birthday itself, right? This is a celebration of our troops, of our military. It's actually not that crazy. And maybe, perhaps, guys, right, Democrats do themselves very little favors by being hysterical about literally everything, right? You know, the classic story of the boy who cried wolf. That's exactly what they are. When they say that everything's authoritarianism, everything's the end of the world, this is 1984, this is a fascism, Project 2025. To an extent, I think what you're largely seeing in the opinion polls and kind of the country in general, especially the 2024 election, is the American people are largely sort of just fatigued by this, right? That when they've constantly been saying threat to democracy, this is the worst thing ever, this is unprecedented, this is not normal, right? For so long, the people just largely are like, okay, here they go again. And that's why I once again reiterate here, I think the No King's Day protest was completely inconsequential, because at this point people do not care. They've tuned out, they've stopped listening. And that's also, by the way, why I think Trump's approval has been going up in the past couple of weeks. Democrats have been going down. The hysteria over Kilmar, Garcia, and deportations has not been an effective political strategy. Nonetheless, we will get into all of that in today's video. So folks, do us a favor, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button as usual down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing is the best way not only to support our videos, but also ensure that you stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so, I want to be clear, wasn't exactly, trying to be exaggerative when people said that, this is North Korea to do a military parade. In the last video, we actually covered how the leftists tried to prove a point by actually waving North Korean flags in front of the White House. And as you can see here from liberal YouTuber Keith Edwards, I guess you could say a colleague of mine in a sense, he goes out and says, quote, "This isn't North Korea. This is America, and it is terrifying." Wow. So let's actually play the video. So this is apparently the military parade that was so terrifying. So terrifying, guys, right? So much North Korea. I can't believe this. We've never seen this before, by the way, in history for sure. Of course, the other comparison, this is from Brian Allen, okay, host of the Allen podcast, another low IQ statement here. He points out that in the heart of Washington, D.C., attendees at Trump's military parade are posing proudly with weapons and tanks as if democracy itself isn't already under siege. you can see here what's actually happening is the Army guys are basically doing a display, you know, so, you know, prop weapons, you know, unloaded, whatever. But it's like, hey, you want to go take a picture with the, I think that's a rocket launcher, right? You want to take a picture here with the automatic weapon. You know, again, as a prop, by the way, as like, hey, take a picture. They're saying this right here is like, what? They're encouraging violence, guys. And, you know, I once again say this is why these people are so hysterical and ridiculous. Apparently, they've never been to a museum in their life, right? I don't know, because, like, you know, we're dealing with people here who apparently never step outside. They've never done anything, hence why they think, oh, there's a parade with the military. This is fascism. There's, you know, a display of military stuff, because I can tell you this right now. I have countless videos of me when I was a kid, because I liked that kind of stuff as a kid, you know. I was a normal boy, you know, right? Unlike, I guess, the new wave that you're supposed to be, whatever. But, you know, I have a bunch of pictures of me with tanks at military museums, with warplanes, with machine guns, etc. It's fairly normal. And I think most people understand, because a lot of people have also taken their kids to these types of events, you know, air shows, right? Military air shows. I guess that also, if you take your son to that, you're promoting fascism in the household. I have no idea. But again, hence why I say these people are so ridiculously hysterical about everything, and why they lose the argument, right? As I said here, yeah, this totally isn't a normal thing that happens at museums or military displays all around the world. Seriously, do these people ever go outside? Yes, absolutely correct. And of course, who could forget the recent comments of none other than Mr. Tim Walz, right? Literally a day before he goes out and says that we all need to tone down the temperature politically in this country, he went on to criticize the U.S. Army 250th anniversary parade, saying that, quote, he's never hoped so hard for rain. He wants it to rain on the soldiers, by the way, in my life, while comparing U.S. troops to, yes, China and North Korea. Take a listen here.
And whenever I come out here, I take great joy in running my mall route and down around the monuments or whatever, and it was horrific down there today. I'm just going to tell you, it just looks wrong, feels wrong, and so I think I'm going to go be with a few thousand folks who kind of have the tradition that there is a separation there, that we don't need this, and this is not Pyongyang on a Saturday. So I'm just going to confess too, and might get me in trouble, whatever. I have never so hoped for rain in my life. So, there you go. So,
I mean, talk about a sick, deranged, and demented guy, truly. Because not only, number one, is their hysteria unfounded, right? As we showed you in the last video, actually, according to CBS YouGov, not a historically pro-Trump poll, +5, despite all the partisanship, approve of the idea of the U.S. Army holding a military parade on June 14th to mark its 250th anniversary. Let's repeat there. Apparently, it is Pyongyang, North Korea. It is against the law somehow to celebrate our own military. Not sure when that became a staple of exclusively authoritarian regimes, right? Not only do we have that, but by the way, as many people here would like to point out, the entire idea of having a military parade is not even unprecedented in American history, right? I understand that there's been a couple decades here of such self-flagellation by our own people, I guess, by our own country, that the idea seems radical. It's like, oh, we would actually celebrate the military? We'd actually have a parade? We'd actually be kind of proud of who we are as a country? I know nowadays that's a thing, right? That's like, oh, we could never do this. But I'd like to point out, it's, again, not unprecedented. As you can see, in 1865, there was, of course, a military parade in Washington, D.C., likely to commemorate the end of the Civil War. In 1919, you also had one to celebrate the end of World War I. 1946, right, World War II. 1961, not exactly sure even what that was about. I think it was just a military parade. They decided to have some type of anniversary, I'm guessing, right? 1976, that is, of course, the 200th birthday of the United States of America, which is why they did this military parade, okay? Keep in mind, this parade this past year was done to celebrate 250 years of the U.S. Army. So we're not talking about something here that's crazy or not been done before, okay? Again, when our minds have just been warped so much by this, like, again, active self-flagellation as a civilization, where it's like we have to just, cry and admit how bad we are, and anything cool must be authoritarian, right? Any, like, legitimate celebration of patriotism, don't you know that's what they do in, like, authoritarian one-party states? Okay, since when do those people get to own those things, right? It's like, yeah, Kim Jong-un breathes air and drinks water and eats food. We're not allowed to do those things as well now, right? But of course, right, the most recent in color TV and photographs, by the way. 1991, of course, there was a military parade to celebrate, I would assume, right, the military victory in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. And guess what, by the way, all this hysteria about tanks in the DC streets, right? The optics of this, guys, they're bringing tanks, they're bringing heavy military vehicles. As you can see, in 1991, those are literally M1 Abrams tanks in the streets. 1946, by the way, you got like this half track or whatever, you know, heavy machinery. 1919, they had tanks in the streets. Okay, so this has all been done before. It's not unprecedented. By the way, even on a yearly basis, okay, you know, only authoritarian regimes hold military parades. As you can see, someone also here pointed out that France, okay, France is a left-wing paradise, according to many people. Oh, they have universal health care. Oh, they're European. You know, they're so much better than these backwards Americans. Well, they hold an annual military parade on Bastille Day, and nobody bats an eye. And as you can see, right, there you have a heavy military APCs in the streets of Paris. Is this authoritarianism, guys? Right? What is this, right? Oh, they're dressed up as the military. What? What are they? Is Emmanuel Macron North Korean now? Emmanuel Kim Jong-un Macron? Really? Or is the hysteria unfounded and ridiculous, and hence why you guys are losing the argument in so many different ways? Again, as I always say, Democrats, this running theme here of picking the absolute worst political hills to die on. Okay, you know, you may go out there and want to say perhaps the most legitimate argument is, oh, it's a waste of taxpayer money. Okay, fine, I guess you could say that. Now, that said, it's only costing $45 million, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of taxpayer money, but fine. But that's one argument to make. The argument to make here that this is like North Korea or authoritarianism is just ridiculous, right? It's just silly. Okay, again, boy who cried wolf. They are incapable of not being hysterical about everything. And then here, guys, as U.S. Senator John Fetterman, of all people, pointed out, again, Democrat here, the, common sense Democrat, some people refer to him as in the U.S. Senate here. But another point he made is that by insulting the troops here, by comparing this to North Korea and all this stuff, you're not just taking shots at Donald Trump. You're taking shots at the active U.S. Army troops who are marching in this parade and serving our country, right? Because again, yes, it is on Donald Trump's birthday as a mere coincidence, as the anniversaries line up there, but it's not a celebration of his birthday. It is a celebration of the U.S. military. And so not only are Democrats attacking Trump by attacking this, again, celebration of our military, it's not for President Trump, it's for them. You are actively denigrating those troops. And as U.S. Senator John Fetterman points out here, I think, by the way, he said this very well, right? Very well articulated. This parade is comprised of our sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers, the very best of us. Correct. That's who Democrats, by making this hysteria, are attacking. It's not just Donald Trump. Again, they continue to have the worst optics about everything. They continue to pick the worst political hills to die on. Yeah, attack active duty troops in the celebration of them. Yeah, I wonder how that's going to go over for you, right? He goes on here to say, regardless of your politics, it's appropriate to celebrate the 250 years of sacrifice, dedication, and service. Yes, correct. Again, what is outlandish about it? There's nothing crazy about it, right? That's why, because Trump is doing it. Because Trump is doing it, therefore it is horrible and authoritarianism. Of course, even on the front, by the way, guys, of this narrative that it's wasteful, you've heard a lot of the talk about how it's going to destroy the streets of DC, right? They're rolling tanks down and that's going to have problems. Watch here as ABC News is forced to admit that even that concern is largely unfounded because, as it turns out, again, remember you heard that, right? The tanks are going to destroy the city and then the taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. Well, apparently, the Army did something very simple. They just changed the tread of like the tracks and stuff so that way the vehicles can fit fine on the streets. And then ABC has to admit, yeah, the talk about how expensive this parade is going to be is apparently not all that founded. Take a listen. This is hilarious.
And there was a lot of talk, of course, about these tanks and beating up the D.C. roads. So what do you think? Are we going to be okay? This is just the beginning.
Well, Kara, this was a big concern when they first started talking about this because, of course, the city of D.C. said you can't roll a bunch of tanks across the city bridges, across the city streets. The Army pulled together a team of engineers and said, let's try to figure this out. I'm told that they now believe that the cost will be zero. They don't think it will cause any damage to the city streets. And that's because they've gotten brand new treads that they're putting on the tracks, that they're putting on all the wheels of these vehicles. The Army says it's going to create this kind of physical barrier between the wheels and the treads and the street. They're also putting steel plates down on the city streets where they think it could cause damage. For example, when a tank is turning, it has to turn really tight. The engineers looked at that and said, okay, let's put some steel plates down, and we believe that the cost of that will be zero. So we'll see what happens at the end of this. As we've mentioned, we still don't know a total cost of this parade. We only know that it costs about up to $45 million to bring all these troops and these vehicles into the city to do this parade. We still don't know the cost of security. We still don't know the cost for the National Park Service. So that is all to be determined.
So yet another point of hysteria that Democrats just wasted a bunch of time making up a bunch of nonsense over? Yeah, gee, you don't say. Now, moving on here, I want to keep hammering home that point. Again, when they rain on this parade, they're not just raining on Trump, they're raining on the actual troops serving in the military. I think to myself, has anyone actually asked these soldiers how they themselves feel about it, right? Do they feel like we're engaging in the Waffen-SS by doing this? Or are they actually kind of excited that they get to celebrate themselves, their branch, each other, etc. in this parade? Of course, we've recently heard reports, actually not reports, it's true by the way, that military recruitment has way surpassed its target goals in 2025. I think we're talking about the highest recruitment here in decades. The Army and all of our armed forces have rapidly dug themselves out of the recruiting hole that they had under the Biden administration. That all magically started to change in 2025. I wonder why, by the way. Yeah, truly wonder why. But take a look here, as you can see smiles and celebration all around, and the supposedly like North Korean fascist authoritarian thing is in reality, right, a big love fest. Check it out. And ask yourself, by the way, do these soldiers look like people who are being used as political pawns? Or do they look like people who are actually happy? And again, military here, morale at an all-time high. Take a listen.
Diversity parade, and please, just don't go anywhere, because we got a lot cooking.
Looks just like North Korea, am I right? Yeah. Honestly, how dare these people, right? How dare these people turn a very good thing, a very normal thing, the celebration of our army, by the way, a great opportunity for these active duty troops to have some fun, take some time off. By the way, I would also argue here, you could make a strong case. You talk about military recruitment, even the 45 million could in a sense actually be a return on investment if it further raises more recruiting numbers, because sometimes you need the PR campaign and all that different stuff. They're really gonna not just again denigrate the president. That's one thing, that's political speech, but to also denigrate the troops that way is disgusting. Okay, now that said, more to be pointed out here, and wokeness makes a great point. The average age, and by the way, this is a thing you keep on seeing when you look at a Trump rally or similar event like this compared to, of course, a Democrat protest, how much younger our party actually has become than theirs. Okay, in the last video, of course, we showed you the footage of literally, unironically, they were rolling, I'm not making it up, right? They were rolling Democrat protesters out of the nursing home in wheelchairs and scooters and walkers, and basically saying, yes, this is the youngest crowd our party has to offer. Meanwhile, take a look. This was the crowd, yes, at the DC parade. And, you notice people are noticeably younger, right? You got young people, middle-aged, some people older, sure. But notice how it's not a sea of white hair. What does that tell you, by the way, about where our movement is and where their movement is? Very, very telling, I would say, in my opinion. So there you have it. And of course, despite all of it, right, you got characters like Cory Booker going out and making this no kings drama.
Donald Trump wants you to believe that dissent is unpatriotic, that protest is un-American. That is a lie. That's what authoritarians try to make you believe.
The footage of Putin,
of course. To stand up for your nation, to stand up for your fellow American, to rise up in dissent, in objection against what a president is doing when they are violating our Constitution.
Right. So I think this video actually perfectly summarizes what I said earlier about the boy who cried wolf effect and the just hysteria of the Democrat Party, right? Because he's like, authoritarian, guys, Putin, look at this. Everything's so bad. No kings. We got to declare that there's no kings. And meanwhile, what's actually happening in DC? Well, look at this authoritarianism, right? Look at this authoritarianism. These guys are smiling, having fun. There's nice music playing. This is just like North Korea. That's why the average American is looking at these people and saying, where? What are you talking about? We don't see it, right? And I think that's a slow process that's happened over the span of 8 to 10 years. Hence why, Donald Trump, won the popular vote. And on the actual issues, repeatedly, poll after poll shows he is winning on them, especially on this immigration thing. Now we find out on the military parade thing as well. Because, yeah, again, they pick the worst hills to die on. They choose to be so hysterical. And this is where they, of course, end up. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta say, John Fetterman is right, okay? Great point, by the way, he made. So I'll give him credit where it's due, right, for that. All right, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.